So as Rick said, my name's Mel Hermanson. I'm going to talk to you a bit about myself to give you some background, and then about my year in the Cattlemen Young Leaders, and the value of having a mentor. So as you can probably tell, I'm Australian by the accent, presently 30 years old. I grew up on a small farm in 2J, Western Australia. We had merino wool ewes, and then we would cross them with a Suffolk or Dorset ram, and we would have prime lambs. In addition to that, we always had a small beef herd. So growing up, I've always been my dad's sidekick. And I've always been extremely passionate about agriculture and livestock, and more specifically cattle. So I've always kept busy, and when I was growing up at school, I had jobs during holidays or after school. So some of them was a rouseabout, so that being a shed hand in the shearing sheds. I was a waitress, and then I also worked on a lamb marking table. And that's similar to a branding table except for sheep. And you have half a dozen sheep, lambs in the cradle, and they're rotating around, and each person will have a task to do to that sheep. And in addition to that, I was also Dad's sheepdog, number one sheepdog, especially when they were out of commission. So after I finished grade 12, I started work for Willowbank for 15 months, and Willowbank was a very interesting property. It was an export quarantine for live dairy heifers, and they were a quarantine, and the heifers would go to China, or they would go to Mexico. They were the markets we were looking into when I was there. They traded grasses, and they would buy heifers and do a bred heifer program with them. In addition, they also, the wife played with purebred jerseys, and then they would also do an embryo transfer program, not for themselves but others. So they would go out and buy recip cows from the market and make sure they're viable for breeding, and then do the ET program on their property because they had such great facilities, and then hold them for so long and then get them back to the farmer. So, and then since then, they also, after I left, they also opened up their own butcher shop, and they have their own brand for the Willowbank meat brand. And that's doing really well. They've got one butcher shop site, and then they also have mobile sites where they're able to sell their own meat. So after Willowbank, I went to the University of Curtin, and I have a bachelor's degree of agribusiness specialising in farm management. And when I was at university, I started work at Kyla Cattle Company during my university breaks. And so the university was quite unique too, in that the campus was on a farm. So it was very hands-on university, and it was a lot of fun. It was, the university had beef, sheep, cropping, and it was really nice. Perfect for a farm kid to go to a university where you're not in the hustle and bustle, and you're located on the farm. So the other thing that was quite awesome about the university was the university breaks were based around the busy times of farming, and so it really promoted the university students to go off and get agricultural jobs like seeding or harvest during their breaks. So I went and worked at Kyla Cattle Company. So after university, I did a small stint as a summer student at a CSIRO, which is a Australian science-based organisation. And that was quite fun. I was running sheep grazing trials for scientists, and we were grazing different perennials and bushes and trees, and monitoring behaviour and also how they were performing. So after I did my little stint at CSIRO, and that was in the hustle or bustle. I was ready to get back out, and I went back to Kyla Cattle Company. So Kyla Cattle Company is a 5,000 head capacity feedlot. They did both custom feeding and owner feeding. They had a small cow herd, which was 100 head, and they were Murray Greys. They backgrounded weaned calves on pasture, stubble, and tree lucerne. So tree lucerne is this up here. It's called Tagasasti. And so we would plant them in rows. This is really sandy country where this is taken. So we would plant them in rows, and some people would plant them so then you'd still be able to get a seeder down the middle, and then you could plant other crops. It did really well in the summertime, and they would kind of go dormant more in the winter. So it was a really great source of off-season grazing. Obviously, summertime is a time in Western Australia where we're not really growing much, whereas summertime in here, that's when we're growing stuff. So while I was at the Kyla Cattle Company, my roles evolved or changed. You know, I started off down the bottom of the ladder when I was a uni student and was helping out. And then when I come back as the feeding manager, so looking after all the nutrition for the feedlot. And then I ventured out and looked after the backgrounding and the pasture side with the owner. That was a lot of fun. So what we would do was a big part of our client was stations from out in Western Australia, and they would bring the cattle to us, and we would be able to sort them into what they would be suitable for. So based on their type or the size, so we would sort them into their markets or what they needed. So some of that was backgrounding them on pasture and getting them up to a certain weight before they would enter into the feedlot. Sometimes we were just able to background them on in stubble or on pastures, and then go direct into their market for them. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, and I didn't say we were also a quarantine at the feedlot, but we did live export for Bos Indicus type cattle to Southeast Asia. So in addition to that, it was a grain operation. I wasn't highly involved in the grain operation, other than, you know, seasonally I would help out where I needed to. And so I really enjoyed my time at Kyla. It was a great company, and some great things have happened at Kyla since Ivan Rogers. He's a great man. So after 5 years, my boss kind of come to me, and the manager's job come up, and he's like, Mel, you know, you could take this on if you wanted to. And pretty informal discussion, and I said, oh, I don't know if I'm ready yet. You know, at this point I was 23 years old, and I had a lot of other things I wanted to do. So at that point I was kind of at a crossroads, and I thought, you know what, I do want to see, before I settle down into a management role, I do want to see what else is out there. So that's what made me come to Canada. I come to Canada when I was 23, and I come on AgriVenture Exchange program. And I was originally supposed to come for 9 months, but I extended my stay for 12 months. And we were on a 22,000 acre ranch out by Empress, Alberta. It's known as Yes Year's Ranch. It's owned by Barry and Joanne Hermanson. The ranch included a small feedlot where they did, at the time, they were doing custom feeding. They fed out their own fats, and they did backgrounding of their calves. It had 7 irrigation pivots, which had a combination of grain production, hay and silage, and then it had a 500 head cow-calf. So when I was at Hermanson's, they calved April, May, and they calved their heifers in March. And that was when I learnt a lot about calving and a lot about cow-calf, because in Australia, we look after our heifers pretty well in the type of farming or ranching that I come from. But the cows are just expected to go out and do it on their own. So we weren't fighting any snowstorms or anything like that, or frozen water. You would never ever see this in Australia. So in February 2011, went back to Australia with my Canadian boyfriend at the time. And that's kind of funny, you know, I was dating a Canadian and I was like, okay, yeah, nice to meet you, I'm going back home now. But then he said, no, actually, I'm coming with you. And I said, oh, we're pretty serious. So we travelled Eastern Australia and New Zealand, and that was a great experience. And then we went home to Western Australia. I started work for Rabobank, which is a very large agricultural lender in Narrogin, Western Australia. And Russell, who was my fiance at the time, worked for large broadacre farmers. We got married while we were over there, and during our honeymoon we travelled the outback of Western Australia and the Northern Territory, which was a great experience because we got to see those seed cattle stations, and within different climates too, you know, the arid, semi-arid, and then the tropical. So after our honeymoon, Russell came back to help his family with harvest, and in February 2013 I helped his family with calving and seeding, and at the time they were calving around 350 head and we were seeding approximately 1,200 acres. And then in June 2013 I got a job with Chinook Credit Union. It's now known as Chinook Financial, division of Connect First Credit Union, as a commercial and agricultural account manager in Hazard and district. Oh, that photo, it's funny. That's that was when I got my permanent residency card, so I was pretty happy. So about me today, this February, March, I've been back in Canada for 5 years. We own 160 acres of cultivated land near Hazard. It was purchased in 2011 by my husband. We own 395 acres of tame native pasture in special areas too, which we purchased in 2015. We have a standing hay agreement on 200 acres of hayland. We rent an additional 200 acres of summer grazing, rent 640 acres of fall grazing. Right now we're carving 40 head of Angus cross cows, and then our family's carving approximately 200. And we're seeding 200 acres of grain per year. We're raising our nephew as well. We've been raising him for 2 years. I'm still working full-time at Chinook Financial as an ag and commercial lender, but I've transferred this summer down to the Drumheller branch. And my husband works full-time at Service Equipment as a road tech. So we're pretty busy. So this is my journey in the Cattlemen Young Leaders. In the fall of 2015, I listened to Ben Campbell speak at this event in Olds, and I was absolutely inspired by his speech, and I needed to know more about this program. I knew I wanted to be doing better than what I was doing, but I didn't know how to get there, and it just sounded like a great way for me to get a foot in the door. So I applied for the program in February 2016, and I was accepted into the semi-finals, which was held at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in the summer of 2016. And so during the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, there was a judging roundtables, and you were expected to talk about different topics, and they kind of rated on how well you talked. So I found out a few weeks later that I had been chosen into the CYL with 15 others, and with the help of industry leads, I was lined up with my mentor, Graham Finn. So when I told Graham that I was speaking at this event, he said, "Don't spend too much time speaking about me, but I think it's worthy to let you know what Graham's kind of doing, because he's very inspirational." So Graham's a part of Union Forage. He presently grazes 365 days of the year and has been doing for very many years. He's a very innovative and progressive producer. He's a fellow Aussie, but he's from the wrong side of Australia. He's from Queensland. And you know, he aspires to work with the environment to improve the environment, and he doesn't just want to be sustainable, he wants to exceed sustainability. And he's willing to try new things, and I find that very inspirational. So with Graham, we completed a mentorship roadmap to guide the year ahead. So this was a really brief part of what my roadmap looked like. So I did want to exceed sustainability better. So part of that was I was really starting to play with rotational grazing before, but actually have a grazing plan. Have a water plan, a soil health plan, and environmental farm plan. I wanted to rejuvenate an older standard of tame pasture. Coming from Australia, I knew quite a lot about the pastures over there, but I still got lots to learn here. When you're a young kid, I used to be that kid, what's that, Dad? What plant's that, Dad? What does that do, Dad? And, I don't have that background here, so having to pick Graham's brain about those things is tremendous. So, we aimed at looking over the fence, see what was working for others, getting to know our land. We established a formal grazing plan and we made some plans for the year ahead. I wanted a better business development plan. So I actually made a new business plan, and we discussed marketing options for smaller base producers and also how to establish long-term rental agreements. And a big part of the CYL for me was networking. So Graham kind of pushed me to network with my neighbours, and then I had a tremendous ability to network with such a big group of other cattlemen young leaders, rub shoulders with industry leads. And then in addition, Graham said that I should join Foothills Forage Grazing and join up to be a part of CARA as well. So my year in the Cattlemen Young Leaders, I was catching up with Graham Finn quite a lot. I had him on speed dial and would just pick his brain when I needed to. We had a couple of farm visits, which was really good, so I could see what he was doing. I tried email and texting, and that wasn't as successful, so just picking up the phone was best. And then there was quite a few events that we attended that we were both at. So the events that I attended was, I went to the Global Roundtable of Sustainable Beef before I actually had been assigned with Graham. And that was at Banff, Alberta. And the reason why I attended that was because, I knew what I was doing at my level as a producer, or what I was trying to do, or what I was trying to achieve. So I was really interested to see the discussions they were having up here at the Global Roundtable and the Canadian roundtables, and really interested in what they were developing and what the challenges were for sustainability on a worldwide basis. Then I also attended the Ag Awareness Day in Brooks, Alberta, and that was really fun too. That was a FCC-driven event, and they get grade 4 kids from the area and teach them about agriculture. I joined Foothills Grazing and signed up to get the information from Chinook Applied Research Association. In January 2017, I went down to Ranching for Profit. We did our environmental farm plan. Our family already had an environmental farm plan, but we weren't a part of that, so my husband and I did our own, and that was really beneficial. Went to Farm Fair International to do beef advocacy and also to see what they're doing up there. A highlight for me was the soil schools with Integrity Soils and Nicole Masters, and that was mind-blowing because when I come into the Cattlemen Young Leaders, my main focus was the cow and the grass, and then it kind of made a shift, and my huge focus is the soil now. And then I went to grazing school with Jim Garish in Gem, Alberta. We had the CYL Spring Forum, and we got to tour Cargill down at High River. That was really interesting, and got to go to a couple of ranches and did some training. And then finally, I had the graduation at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference of 2017. However, I got to be a judge for this year's Cattlemen Young Leaders, so that was a lot of fun too, to be able to listen to to be on the other side and listen to the next group of CYLs coming through. So that was a great experience. So present management practices today for our cattle side. We were a part of the McDonald's pilot program and now rolled into the Canadian Roundtable Sustainable Beef. For our pastures, we established soil testing and baseline sites so we could monitor our progress. We rotationally graze but most importantly manage planned graze on our summer and fall pastures. We're grazing right now between May 15th to January 15th, just depending on the year and what's going on. Right now we're feeding hay from January 15th to May 15th, and then we're calving March 1st. So that's kind of outside of our ability to change that, because that's what our family's doing, and we kind of need to work in with our family. So we are selling wean calves in October we're using the calm calf wean, and we're preferably selling direct to a feedlot to eliminate some stress on our calves. So if you're not sure what the calm calf wean is, I recommend that you just check it out on YouTube. It's a pretty cool device, and we really loved it when we used it. We were really inspired at how we were helping the transition for both the calf and the cow into the next stage. And then in addition to that, I'm just trialing different things. Right now I'm putting legumes in and around my mineral. So legumes, they'll go through the cattle stomach really well and be able to be spread out through our fields. And then I'm putting it around my mineral too, with the idea that the cows will kind of hoof it in for me. And maybe we'll see how that goes next year if I'm successful with that. I put some probiotics into the cattle mineral this year too that I ordered from the States. And the reasoning for that was I was noticing a lot of my manure from last year wasn't really breaking down that great. Not all of it, just some of it. So I just thought, how can I help cycle these nutrients back to the soil? So I thought that the gap might be the fact that I was using Ivermec and it might be affecting the probiotics. We're also trialling some bale grazing on selective sites where it's not very productive, just to see if we're able to add nutrition to that land and organic matter to that land and rejuvenate it a little bit. Then I tried some frost seeding of legumes this year, just because I had some extra legumes left over from what I was putting in my mineral, and just to see if we're successful there. I did that in October, so I'll see that impact next year. In addition to that, I'm playing around, I'm having some fun with alternative trials on the pasture too. So, I've been spraying some mycorrhizal fungi to some sites, adding some fulvic acid to some pasture sites, some seawater and seaweed, and also making protozoa tea. Sort of some alternative stuff that I'm having some fun with. So the management practices for the farming, we're no-till. We're moving into controlled traffic farming. We just started variable rate seeding, and we've been doing variable rate fertilizer for a couple of years. We complete soil mapping on our cultivated land using electrical conductivity, and then we do annual soil testing of the zones. And in addition to that, we're really getting into trying to work better with the microbes in the soil. So next year, I'm actually looking to sell the majority of my bred cows, hang on to a couple, and purchasing Angus cross-yearling heifers direct from a ranch. Looking at syncing the heifers with one prostaglandin shot with a short breeding of 45 days. Continue with rotational grazing and managed grazing. Selling the bred heifers direct off pasture. And the reason why I made that move is because, or looking to make that move is because the amount of hay that we were feeding and how we were feeding hay, we were kind of giving the cow a bit of a free ride. So we weren't accounting for, when we were feeding our hay, we were kind of giving it to the cow, not really separating out that enterprise. So by doing this way, because we were calving so early, and because we're feeding so much hay manually, but going and looking at the heifers, it's less gross income, but overall it's a stronger net income because the expenses are less and there's less time constraints for me, and that's really important. And because my labour is valuable. And then we're also looking at direct seeding into some summer pastures. We're looking at getting our legumes back to 60%, adding some new grass, we've been mining the grass a little bit, so adding some fertiliser, then also some stimulants for microbes. So when I look back at my original Cattlemen Young Leaders application, I feel like I've learnt a lot and I've grown a lot during the year. I look back and I was kind of lost. I knew I wanted to be doing better. I knew that there are more opportunities out there, but I didn't quite know how to get it. And also coming from Australia, it's been a great way for me to get a better foot in the door in the industry. So now, like, my attitude's really changed. I'm really excited and hopeful for the industry. Like, I'm no longer feeling stuck. The networking that I've created, I know how to get information. I feel a lot more educated. Networking and connected with like-minded producers has been fabulous, because often, sometimes you might be in a bit of a bubble where the information that you have is, there might be more out there outside that bubble. There might be better ideas, but you're in the comfort of a bubble. So it's been really great to get out of the bubble. So now I seem to be looking at things with a different lens, and then I've been really challenging my own and also our family's paradigms about how we do things, which has been really beneficial and exciting. So it's opened doors, and even doors that I haven't even imagined existed for me. And right now we're looking at a total different direction that we ever anticipated that we'd be looking at, and we're really excited about it. I'm not going to give too much information on that because it's not a sure thing, but even just the idea of what we're looking at is really exciting. So while I have your attention, the year of me being with the Cattlemen Young Leaders wouldn't be possible without my employer, Chinook Financial. They've been really supportive of my journey. And obviously Graham Finn has been amazing and a huge part of my year at the Cattlemen Young Leaders. The CCA, Canadian Cattlemen's Association, is amazing, and the program is really a great program that's really known worldwide. And then it wouldn't be possible without the partners and the sponsors and the supports of the Cattlemen Young Leaders. If anyone is interested in the Cattlemen Young Leaders, they have a really great website with information. You're eligible to apply between 18 and 35. My focus for the Cattlemen Young Leaders was the more producer type focus, but it's not restricted to that. All types kind of apply, from vet students to professional science and to the producer. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So thank you for your time.